San Jose State offensive lineman David Quest.
We used to be so strong, and now your words are covered in lies.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Justin Godsey for the Justin Godsey Podcast. Thank you so much for checking out tonight's video. Today, guys, I am jumping back into doing some more mixed martial arts videos, as I have been away from making mixed martial arts videos for a number of months now. I used to do the MMA Roundtable. That was going off into a lot of good directions, but I decided that, with my lengthy schedule, I'm always, in school, I'm working full-time, that I'm not able to, keep up with what's been going on in the MMA world, so I decided to hand my website over to another domain owner. They changed it up a little bit, and so they're going in a whole new direction. I'm still going to be, writing now and then on that website, but you know what? Now that I've started the Justin Godsey Podcast, I really wanted to get back into doing mixed martial arts. But, I've been away, like I said, I've been away from covering MMA for a while now. And tonight, UFC held UFC Fight Night 45. And I've known about this event for a while now. I've been tweeting all about it, on how excited I was. When you look at this card, yes, it doesn't have those, phenom kind of fighters when it comes to this card. But you know what? The main event was, it was fantastic. You had Donald Cerrone taking on Jim Miller. The co-main event was Edson Barboza taking on Evan Dunham. It was overall a very amazing card. I really did like it. The prelims on Fox Sports 1 was great. Gleison Tibau versus Pat Healy. The future for Pat Healy is still in the question now. He has not had, the greatest road or the greatest run in the WWE. That's embarrassing what I just said. In the UFC, but hopefully that, the UFC will give him another opportunity, as it was fairly close in that fight between Tibau and Pat Healy. But today, guys, I'm here looking at the Donald Cerrone versus Jim Miller fight. What is next for both of these competitors? Now, Donald Cerrone, this has been a year for in the UFC in general. They kicked off 2014 on a high note, and we did not know that this was going to be a year of epic proportions. We saw, a couple of title changes, going on December. Chris Weidman held on to his championship against Anderson Silva. We saw a new bantamweight champion in DJ Dillashaw. What's next in this UFC? We see a lot of turnarounds, and Donald Cerrone, solidifies, that big turnaround. A lot of people have been saying, ever since that loss against Anthony Pettis back on January 26th, I would like to say, I think that was the UFC on Fox, Johnson versus Dodson, and I think that was over in Denver, Colorado. Make sure I want to be sure on that one. And it was a UFC on Fox event, and a lot of people were like, after that Anthony Pettis loss, it just seemed, a big bumpy road going forward for Donald Cerrone. A lot of people said, he lost his groove. At the time, he was getting off victories against, Jeremy Stevens and a good friend of his, and Melvin Gillard, who's no longer with the UFC. A lot of people were like, this is going to be Donald Cerrone's opportunity to be like, if I defeat Anthony Pettis at the highest game Anthony Pettis was at the time, if he wins, he's going to get a title shot. He lost to Anthony Pettis, so it went back to the drawing board for himself, and he went back and got another opportunity at UFC 160 against the debuting in the UFC in KJ Noons, after he had a very successful career in Strikeforce. KJ Noons comes over to the UFC at UFC 160, ultimately just gets dominated as Donald Cerrone defeats him via unanimous decision, and that was a good note. He's getting back on a winning note. It's time to get back to that championship formation. To all of a sudden, look into August, a couple of months after May 25th, back at UFC 160, back in the coming August, you had your fight against Rafael dos Anjos, in which Cerrone lost via unanimous decision. But since then, he's been on a complete tear in the UFC. We all know what Donald Cerrone does in his free time. He does a lot of the daredevil moves, whether it's doing this cattle stuff, the bull riding, and whatever the case may be. We know what Donald Cerrone does. He has been on an ultimate tear in this UFC division, the UFC lightweight division. I had never seen such a big turnaround in Donald Cerrone. He was a guy who fell out of the rankings at one point, and all of a sudden he leapfrogged up to number 6 going into this fight against Jim Miller. Now, in this winning streak, he has a 3-fight winning streak going into this fight against Jim Miller. His victories over Evan Dunham, Martins, and he also got Edson Barboza most recently back in April. Going into this fight against Jim Miller, it means a whole lot to Donald Cerrone. And this clarifies him. If he defeats Jim Miller, he's going to get a much higher ranked opponent. Jim Miller, a guy who has had a great winning streak himself. He has an unbeaten streak in I think 3 or 4 fights. His most greatest fight I've ever had to see was back, I think it was at UFC 155 when he defeated Joe Lozon in that bloody battle between those two. Jim Miller a very much appreciated and much respected wrestler and fighter in the lightweight division. You really look at Jim Miller as if you defeat him, it's a great step forward for Donald Cerrone, and that's what he did tonight. Donald Cerrone comes in here with such ruthless aggression. I've never seen this Donald Cerrone before. He's always, he's pushing the fight. He's keeping it on his terms. He's pushing the pressure on him, and that's what made him the victory. That's what gave him that victory. In the second round, he knocked out Jim Miller via head kick and punches, and that's solidifying him an opportunity going down the line. But the question is, who is potentially next for Donald Cerrone? And now a lot of people are like, why not we see, Rafael dos Anjos versus Donald Cerrone again? Why not, try to avenge that loss that you just had? You have him go up against Rafael dos Anjos. That could be a legitimate opportunity. Rafael dos Anjos is coming off a loss against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And then you also got to look at Khabib. A lot of people have been waiting for, Khabib to make this big push in the UFC and the lightweight division. The undefeated 22-0 guy. He has had some great fights. Fights against Gleison Tibau, against Thiago Tavares, Pat Healy, Abel Trujillo. When you look at it, he really needs that big push, a highly ranked competitor in the lightweight division. Donald Cerrone as well. He got himself a good winning streak, but he really needs to push it. If he really wants to get into that title contention, he's just right on the cusp. He's right there at number 5. If Demetrius Johnson can face off against, if Chris Carriazo can get a title shot against Demetrius Johnson, Chris Carriazo also done a great job as well. But you know what? Being ranked that in the top 5 is good. I guarantee it that Cerrone will be squeezing right into the top 5. But you know what? If Carriazo can get a title shot, I think Donald Cerrone can get a title shot. This is a guy who has competed against the very best. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, defeating Jim Miller. Like I said, if Chris Carriazo can get a title shot at the current standard where he is at the current stature where he is at, he has not even headlined a main card, I don't think. I think he's headlined, 2 or so. But Donald Cerrone, a much veteran name, has really made a name for himself, reinvented himself, and has really has been going on a high note for himself. So Donald Cerrone should be getting a title shot, after his next following matchup. And I would think, a fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov, hopefully around maybe October, maybe September at the earliest. I would love to see Donald Cerrone back into the octagon, and hopefully, if he defeats and surprisingly defeats Khabib, Donald Cerrone is already lined up for a championship. I think Thompson is a good option there, but he needs to get a victory for himself. He needs to start building up a winning streak for himself. Benson Henderson's a great name as well, but when you look at this lightweight division, it's so packed up because you have Anthony Pettis versus Gilbert Melendez. That's already been set in stone. Benson Henderson is waiting for another opponent. Why not have Donald Cerrone versus Benson Henderson? That could be another opportunity. But a lot of people will want to see a fight that can bring some fireworks, and a lot of people are like, Donald Cerrone versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. That's what I'm going for. I hope the fans would agree with me. I hope you guys agree with me. I would love to get your guys' opinion about this. I'm Justin Godsey for the Justin Godsey Podcast. I'll catch you guys in my next video.